Sounds good.
Okay.
Do I have access to share my? Yes.
You have. I made you co-host.
Yep, I thought that. I see people in the waiting room. Got it.
All right, everybody. So nice to have you here. Why don't we start as we're kind of getting everybody still rolling in? We'll just do a little 1-minute breath practice to kind of get ourselves in the present moment. So we'll go 5, 5, 6. Go ahead and kind of get in your body here a little bit. Feel free to close your eyes if you want. And we'll just do a nice little 5, 5, 6 for 1 minute. Here we go. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Last one. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5. Excellent. So before we get rolling, we still have a few people probably still coming in. Just want you to take a minute and see if you can bring your awareness down into your chest. Just allow yourself to just kind of bring your attention and your awareness into your chest. Notice if you feel any sensations, any pangs, pulses. Just notice, no judgment. Go ahead and shimmy your body a little bit, or just see if you can find yourself into getting like a couple percent more comfortable. Really just allow the gravity of your body to just settle in. All right, and see if you could just kind of let your awareness go down from your chest, down through your ribs, down into your core and down to your belly. Just allow yourself to identify where your body is through your gut. And just again, noticing what you feel, bringing a little bit more awareness. Great. Last one, just all the way down. Just feel your feet on the ground. Just get a sense of allowing your feet to just stabilize, get grounded. Feel the connection in your shoe or in your sock, or just that feeling on the floor. Just have an understanding that underneath the floor, underneath your foundation, that there's the earth beneath you, and just feel yourself grounding into this moment right here. All right, so we have a special session for us. We'll see if we can get him to stick around a little longer, but back by popular demand, Dr. Michael Mannino, good friend of both Scott and myself. His bio is about this long, so I'm going to try to summarize a little bit. PhD in neuroscience. Really, the thing that stands out for me is he's got this really great way of taking all of this very difficult, deep science and applying it and articulating it in ways that's just so inspiring. He's also a peak performance coach at the Flow Research Collective. So, he has a lot of experience trying to articulate how to use this science and bring it into practical application. Areas that he's focused in are in perception and learning and memory and attention. He's done a lot of work around vagal tone stimulation. He's just all around, just really a wonderful guest for us. And, Michael, just to kind of tee you up a little bit, right now in our program, we're talking a lot about metabolic body budget and how to, in a very simple way, how to kind of keep a more balanced budget. Stats that really jump out to me through some of the work with Andrew Huberman at Stanford, where he's, 14% of our metabolic load is going just with our brain talking to itself and thinking. And even, I think he said 40 to 50% of our caloric output is in the frontal part of our brain. And so I think what we've noticed a lot in our program, and I think, it's big shocker, we're all human beings, is that we spend a lot of time, from the chin up to the top of the head, really kind of letting our thinking mind dominate. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because you are such an advocate for the body, the body being the mind. And really and when you think about that concept, it's really kind of interesting. And the catchphrase of that is embodied cognition. But as we did in this warm-up practice, and as we've done throughout this course, we're really trying to get a little bit more in our body. And the last thing to tee you up is, in our program, we talk a lot about the bookends of flow. So we really, really highlight struggling more effectively and recovering more efficiently. So would love to hear your thoughts around embodied cognition, interoception, and kind of in that space. And then, also just kind of your thoughts around practical applications and ways to use some of the science in our day-to-day lives. So thank you so much for being here, Michael. It's awesome to have you, bud.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. Good to see everybody. And thank you so much for the invitation and the introduction. So that was pretty cool. Piggybacking on what you just said, actually, Damon, from Huberman, yeah, that's true, right? What you said is true. But one interesting thing to think about is not to be able to want to calm that metabolic output of the brain, but reorganize it, because the brain's never calm. There's a popular neuro myth out there that we only use 10% of our brains. That's been largely debunked. We actually use a lot of our brains almost all of the time, even when we're sleeping. So the brain's never really at rest. It's always consuming massive amounts of energy, right? It's 3% of the body weight, and it consumes 20% of the energy, the caloric output, all of the time, right? So what you want to do is develop strategies that enable you to be able to reorganize how you're actually using that metabolic output in the appropriate way. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah. First mic drop moment. Yes, I saw that you said. Okay, so that's something to think about. Yeah. There's really
interesting, just one thing just to kind of add in there, what we've really, stressed and personally and throughout this program this week is making smarter withdrawals. So right. That, to your point, not necessarily trying to, go on some sort of deep calm where we're not really, using any of our energy, but directing our energy in ways that are productive in our lives.
Right.
And even philosophically, what does it mean to live a full, rich life? So, go for it.
No, so I mean, like that, and that's really, we'll get to this in a second, but that's what interoception really means. You're not calming, in a sense, your brain. You're just refocusing your attentional resources on the inside in your body. And doing that then allows you later to easily transition into high performance flow states, better recovery, all of those kinds of things. So that's something that, yeah, that's interesting. But what you were, absolutely true. And so I like that you started off philosophically. So let me actually, that's perfect segue. So, and you said the body is the mind. So we'll talk about that in a second. That's true. Let me show you some slides, actually, if y'all don't mind.
Great.
Okay, let me prepare. Let me see. Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah. Is it small, Damon, or is it okay visually?
No, it's big. It's in presentation type mode. Yeah,
okay, cool. Okay, let me put you guys over here so I can see. So yeah, we'll talk about what is embodied cognition. I want to describe to you the importance of that and what Damon was saying. One example of embodied cognition, and I think one of the most important examples to, for our purposes, right? For flow, for navigating the flow cycle, for performance, for recovery, all of those things is interoception. So that's why, well, that's why you invited me. I'll talk about it. And then we'll talk about some practical ways to increase your interoceptive sensitivities and accuracy, okay? So I want to talk a little bit about the science and philosophy of it. And I showed this here during my TEDx talk, and I thought it's so good, I wanted to show you guys too. So the notion of embodied cognition is just, it's really simple. And I say notion because I don't want to say theory. It's a little more complex than that. You know, science is a little tricky, so it's more of a notion. It is a theory. There's a bunch of different theories. Embodied cognition is a really catch-all term.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I'm using that word, notion. But it's this idea that cognition involves more than the brain. You don't just think with your mind, you think with your body. Okay? It's counterintuitive. You don't just think with your mind, you think with your body, and you think with your body and how it moves. Okay? So we'll get into that, but the idea is that cognition, your cognitive processes, and by that I mean your attention, which is really important for flow. Flow follows focus. Your everything from language to your emotional regulation to your perception, learning, memory, all of those are cognitive processes, involve more than your mind and more than your brain. They involve deeply your brain's connection to your body and how that body interacts with the environment. What I mean by interact is you're sitting down, I grab this, like I form my hand around this. I'm interacting with the environment in that way. Okay. By the way, stop me if you have any questions or just cut me off. Anybody can just, you know, unmute themselves and just let me know. So let me play. This is a philosopher. This guy's name is Alva Noah, and he's one of my favorite philosophers. Who a lot of my work is based on, actually. So he's not a scientist, he's a philosopher. And he's talking about in this clip, in this big thing clip, consciousness. Okay, so how we're subjectively aware of things. And one of the things that he's saying in here is that we shouldn't look for consciousness in the brain and our minds. We should look for, if we're trying to describe and understand consciousness, in our bodies and how they move. All right, so I want to play this for you here. Hopefully you can hear it too.
We've been looking for consciousness in the wrong place. We've been looking for it inside of us. For me, that's a sort of profound mistake. It's a little bit like trying to find the dancing in the musculature of the dancer, or trying to find the value of money in the chemical composition of the dollar bill. It's the wrong kind of place to look. The idea that I've had in my work is that instead of thinking about consciousness as something that happens in us, in our brains or anywhere else, why don't we try to think of consciousness as something that we do or enact or perform in our dynamic involvement with the world around us?
Okay, so what he means there is, don't think of yourself as in your mind. Think of your whole being, your whole person. That's what the body is, the mind really means. Now, how do we translate that into practical applicability, right? What does that mean for our daily lives? When we cognitively reframe that notion that our minds are just not in our brains, but they're in our bodies, our whole entire being is how our bodies are moving and the connection between those two things. And I even just made a mistake. So that's what I mean cognitively reframing in the language that we use. When we think about those two things, there's really just one thing. Okay, there's really just one thing. That's what the body is the mind, right? Okay. So the embodiment thesis in general is this notion that many features of cognition, like attention, are embodied and they are deeply dependent upon characteristics of the physical body and how you're aware of the physical body and what's going on of an agent, such that the agents beyond the brain body, its body, plays a significant causal role or physically constitutive role in that agent's cognitive processing. And that just means that, right, as I said, how you carry yourself, your posture, how you move, how much you're aware of what's going on inside your body and its interactions with the world, gesturing like I'm doing now, all of those things influence our decision-making, our thinking, our attentional regulation, our emotional monitoring, all of those kinds of things. I hope that makes somewhat sense because it's a little counterintuitive. Now, one example, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Actually, I had a quick question about that.
Yeah.
One of the big hangups for most humans is thinking. And I think what you just said there was that our movement can even influence our thinking.
Yep, exactly right. Exactly.
I see that a lot in high performance, where somebody knows how to execute certain physical skills, but they start thinking about executing those skills, and then they lose their ability to do what they already know how to do, right?
Yeah.
And most of us are spending a lot of time in our head thinking. So are you saying that by moving our bodies, we can influence and, in a sense, override the interpreter or that sort of inner chatter that's incessant?
Well, it's more subtle than that. What I'm saying is that when you not by moving your body, but having an awareness of how your body moves and what's going on inside your body, that can definitely have an effect on your decision-making processes and things like that. For example, I'll jump the gun a little bit, but Antonio Damasio has something called the somatic marker hypothesis. And he found scientifically that decision making, when we make decisions about what to do, that's really enormously influenced by how we're feeling in our body. Okay, so if you can change how you're feeling in your body and pay attention to that, that will have a downstream effect, as you'll see in a couple of slides, on your decision making, on thinking, on your ability to recognize emotions in other people's faces. All of those kinds of things have been shown. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, we pattern a lot of our program this week around Lisa Feldman Barrett's work.
Right.
And she highlighted the case that if you were to go before a judge, when that judge is hungry, you are more apt to be, there are more guilty verdicts when judges are in these states of being, hangry for, and so the influence, whether we know it or not, is real. And I think I just wanted to kind of highlight why this body budget concept that we're working with this week is so important for how we see and interpret ourselves and the world around us.
Yeah, and I'll come back to this later, but let me just, since we're talking about it now, just show you this slide here. Even more altruism. A study just showed that people with higher levels of interoception are more altruistic when they make moral decisions about helping other people.
Jeez.
So when you're more in touch with what's going on inside your body, you're more likely to make better decisions about helping others. And the reason why is because the parts of the brain that are involved, like I see you right now, you're nodding your head. I know that you're responding to me. You're having these body movements. You're moving your head, right? And that my brain is interpreting meaning in that motion. Okay. And so when you have higher vagal tone and higher levels of HRV and higher levels of thereby have higher levels of interoception, you have better ability to recognize those things. I know you have mental states right now. You're nodding. I know that you have wishes, desires. I know those. This is also when things go wrong, like in autism or schizophrenia, you have lower levels of interoception. And so I have here, research has also shown that problems with interoception are very highly correlated to cognitive and mental disorders, like autism and depression. But let me go back. Okay, and I just want to give one really cool example of embodied cognition. And I love talking about this because it's the rubber hand illusion. A really well-studied phenomenon. It's just one example. There's many examples, but this is one. And it shows that there's, the body has an effect on the mind. And that's basically what this is. So the person here has this blocking, something blocking their vision of their real hand. And they have a rubber hand that kind of looks like it's coming from their body. And then there's their other hand. And they're told to visually focus on the rubber hand. Okay. The experimenter takes two paintbrushes, okay, and rubs the rubber hand simultaneously with rubbing the real hand. Now remember, they can't see their real hand, but they can feel the paintbrush rubbing the real hand. And they can't feel the paintbrush rubbing the rubber hand, but they can see it. So what happens is after a very short amount of time, and you put people in brain scanners and actually see that the parts of their brain involved in feeling this part of their body light up when they start rubbing the rubber hand. What happens is the person starts to adopt the rubber hand as part of their body. They feel it so much so that the person then comes with a fork and stabs the rubber hand, and they jerk their real hand back and actually feel some sensations of anxiety and pain.
Wow.
Really phenomenal experience. I always do this when I give my neuro yoga workshop and to people, and even in a real context, not in the lab, it works very. And this is because there's a sense of body ownership, and that can go wrong. For example, there's disorders, there's neuropathological disorders, something called somatoparaphrenia, where people don't feel like part of their body actually belongs to them. Okay. And interestingly, a very interesting study 2 years ago or 3 years ago showed that, and I'm going to talk about this in a second, one of the ways to increase your interoception is to do mindful movement practices, which I'll define that in a second, like Tai Chi or yoga or Qigong or something like this. And scientists have found that expert practitioners of Tai Chi, which is an interoceptive movement, are much less susceptible to the rubber hand illusion than controls. Okay, so this is some really good scientific evidence there. Let me, I'll just keep going. So again, stop me. But another example is language and gestures. So I'm gesturing now and making movements with my body. Really interesting study showed that if you put people in scanners, well, first you learn a different language, foreign language, foreign words of a foreign language. Then they had another group learn words of a foreign language, but they were making gestures as they were learning those words. And they found when they put those people in scanners and asked them to actually think about and memorize and remember the words that they learned, the people who made the gestures were in the scanner not moving, and parts of their motor cortices were lighting up when they were remembering the words that they learned. And they learned them quicker. Why is this the case? It's because your motor parts of your brain that are involved in movement those systems are very tightly linked up with the systems of the brain that are involved in learning and memory and language, which is a cognitive process. All right. This is another example. Let me skip that slide. We can come back to it if we want. But so what's this notion of interoception, which is a really good example of embodied cognition? And I already mentioned Antonio Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis. And that actually that's on my next slide, so I won't tell you now. But let's just define interoception first. So I just pulled this from the web here. Interoception is what's going on, or paying attention to what's going on inside your body, all right, versus exteroception, which is paying attention to what's going on outside your body. Interoceptive awareness constitutes feeling your heart rate, your muscle tension, whether you're thirsty, whether you have a dry mouth, bathroom needs, sexual desires is not on here as well, hunger, fulfillment, cramps, those kinds of things. And certain people have higher levels of interoception sensitivity and accuracy, and certain people have lower levels, right? And I was going to say, I just forgot what I was going to say, but yeah, so that's interoception versus exteroception. Okay, so it's paying attention to what's going on inside your body. That's what I was going to say is when you were doing the exercise in the beginning of the talk here, one thing to notice is your teeth clenched, and is the tongue on the roof of your mouth? And mine always is. And when that's one of my classic exercises that I do in between meetings, or when before I try and get into a flow state, is I do this body scan. And the first thing I do is, my tongue is on the roof of my mouth and my jaw is sort of clenched. So you can build up a habit of, you can set yourself like a tiny habit or a trigger where you're looking at that. And that's the first thing. So itch is, nociception is being aware of pain. Thermoception is being aware of like how hot your body is, for example. How do you feel? Can you tell when you have a fever? Can you tell when you're even approaching that? And so that's this notion of interoception, and it has to do with this mental representation of the self. Yeah, Damon, you're going to ask a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's counterintuitive, I think. I certainly, with the people that I work with, and I would even say personally, I think it rings counterintuitive to think that why the heck would I want to turn my attention to all the things that are going on inside of myself? Won't that just be anxiety provoking?
Right.
If I feel like my heart rate is rising, why am I actually, turning in and paying attention to that? And what's the value in doing that? Because there is a strong case that, I know that with athletes that I work with, when they're very tight, I actually have them turn in and describe, oh, heart is beating fast. My arm is tight.
Tight body, tight mind.
So by just identifying with those, feeling sensations and that more in just increasing your ability to be more interoceptive, you're able to then open yourself up to more choices. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And that's exactly what I'm saying in this slide here, that you're more choices, decision-making, thinking. And I got to write that down. I just came up with that. Tight body, tight mind.
I like it.
I love that. So when we riff, man, you always bring these things out of me. Like I'm gesturing like this. Like that's a meaningful gesture, right? Interoception is linked to cognition, and that's what all these scientists have found. So, for example, Antonio Damasio, with this better decision making, the somatic marker hypothesis, found actually that people who are more sensitive to their own heartbeat are better at making decisions. And that's a really that's been replicated. It's a really well-established finding. It goes even beyond that. The nuanced science goes beyond that, but they found that people have higher levels of interoceptive accuracy with how their heart's actually beating at different times of the day, when they wake up, when they go to bed, when they're doing any daily activity, are actually better at performing cost-benefit analyses and making decisions about themselves or about other people or about what to do. So that's a decision making is a cognitive process. It's very important, especially when we're trying to increase our performance and optimize our performance and get into flow states, because we want to make effortless effort, right? Making effortless decisions about what to do next. So better emotional. Yeah, go ahead.
Would it be correct to say that if you have more of an awareness of your heartbeat, really also we know that there's intelligence, there are neural networks within our heart and gut. Would it be fair to say that maybe some of that information or that intelligence is kind of going upstream and allowing you to have access to more data?
Oof, that's a good question. Yeah, absolutely. 80% of the vagus nerve fibers go from the viscera, right, to the brain, and then 20% go the other way around. So you're getting all of this data, right? Well, I would probably use the word data rather than intelligence, because I don't want to there are a bunch of neurons in the heart and the sinoatrial node of the heart, and they have lots of information. They connect to the lungs, then that connects to the brain in this circuit. But you're getting a lot of data from the heart. The brain is getting a lot of data from that, especially from the gut, where 90% of the serotonin, which is involved in mood, is created in your gut, right? So that's the importance of that gut-brain axis. Your heart-brain axis is also important absolutely in this sense. So there is metaphorically a certain level of intelligence in your heart, literally, quite literally. The extent to which that affects your cognition is now being studied. So I don't want to jump the gun and say, a lot of times in this field, the claims are ahead of the science.
Yeah.
And it should be the other way around. So I just want to be careful, but what you're saying is absolutely right. Overall. Yeah. And so people with higher levels of interoceptive sensitivity have better emotional regulation. better emotional monitoring. People with higher vagal tone can have, oh, well, we could talk about this next time, but have lower levels of inflammation, lower levels of stress, better mood, better recovery. And this is linked to interoception because that's the connection between the vagus nerve is the connection between your brain and your body. Better social functioning. So this is a really interesting finding, social communication. So part of cognition I mentioned is decision making, attention, learning, and memory, but there's something called social cognition, like the nodding of the head kind of thing, right? Understanding what to do in social situations, and how to communicate. And I just put this quote from this paper because it's so good. This is a good example of embodied cognition here. Specifically, improving one's interoceptive sensitivity and interoceptive accuracy can improve one's social cognition. We suggest that improving the sensitivity or accuracy of interoception can enhance one's ability to understand the mental state of others, thereby enabling better social communication. And it's been shown that people with higher levels of HRV are better at recognizing emotions in other people's faces. So how can we improve interoception? The first thing I would recommend actually is to go online to this website here. And I just put it as a reminder. I'll put it here in the chat, is to go online. Let me see if I have access to the chat here. Yeah. Let me see if I have access. I'll put this here. Let me see if it works. Yeah. You can go online and actually take this assessment, this diagnostic, which I would very much recommend. It's called the multi-dimensional assessment of interoceptive awareness. And it measures different dimensions or categories of interoception. I notice where in my body I'm comfortable. 0, never, or 5, always. So, things like this, I try to ignore pain. Take this take this, get a sense of where you are, okay? And then you could do some practices to increase your interoceptive sensitivity and your interoceptive accuracy. And it will just you'll get so much bang for your buck over and above superfoods, over and above brain games, over and above supplements. Trust me, as a neuroscientist, increase your interoception, practice that, and you'll get a lot of bang for your buck. And all of these things that we're talking about, recovery, and so on and so forth. Mindful movement, over and above just movement in general, or running or something like. If you're running or walking or something like that, you can make that a mindful practice. That's one of my things. I put here walking flow. I like to go walking, and I like to manipulate the challenge skills balance to try and get into flow when I'm walking. Because when you get into flow, you're in a task, you're doing something. So, okay, we're all pretty good at walking. Not all of us, obviously, but we can talk about that. But when you're doing that, you can focus on the rhythm of your body and the coordination. So like how your contralateral right arm goes with your left leg. Try doing it the other way. See how awkward it is to walk, and try and put yourself in in different parts of your body, your mind in different parts of your body when you're walking. Feel the floor, feel how you're hitting your heel first, how your hips are weighing. Then how your hips are swaying. Then you could do like kind of exercises where you can tap your fingers, maybe to the rhythm of your walking. Or what's really good is to coordinate breath with movement, like in Tai Chi or Qigong, or even yoga, or even walking, right? So you could do the breathing exercise that you were doing, but you could correlate that rhythm of breathing with the rhythm of your walking.
Michael, I have a question, because again, we've been talking about the gateways of flow, which is the struggle and the recovery. And again, it sounds like as you're talking, what I'm making up in my head is that there are ways that, we can use this awareness to help us through struggle, but also can help us in that recovery in terms of calming ourselves, in terms of recovering, or even using interoception to get charged up. I mean, it sounds like there's a number of different ways if we have this internal awareness that we can, either turn on or turn off with that kind of with a little more, I guess, effectiveness or even efficiency for that matter, if you have that awareness, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's like you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly right. So increasing your levels of interoception, this notion of embodied cognition, is going to help you better navigate the flow cycle. You're gonna be gonna minimize the struggle phase. You're gonna drop into a flow state a little bit more easier. You're going to recover faster, and those kinds of. I use my HRV personally to help me actually navigate the flow cycle. And like when my HRV is high, and I go do my primary flow activity, for example, my struggle is just it's a struggle, but it's still like it's just a lot shorter and a lot easier to like manage to get into my performing state, a high performing state. So it absolutely.
Yeah. So we'll have to circle back and really get into HRV, because I think that's another part of the equation that most people don't understand. So we'll have to bring you back for that one.
That's a big one. I love talking about HRV and vagal tone. It's enormously important. And it is the neurobiological and psychophysiological mechanism by which all of this is actually true. All of the stuff that I'm talking about now. We go underneath and we understand why. But so sitting still and doing internal body scans like Damon, you were doing, that's excellent. Resonant breathing while feeling your pulse. Or trying to feel your pulse in different parts of your body. Like, here, you could put your two fingers together and just calm and try to feel your heartbeat. It's pretty easy for me now, but in between if you have the pressure, feel the pressure between your fingers and try and feel your heartbeat there. Try and do that in other parts of your body. Rubbing your hands to feel your heat.
And really important in that pulse. We're also in most of these things doing our best to not add the judgment part of this, right? Where say I
said it was like better for me because I've been doing it for a while. I didn't mean to imply. Yes.
Even if my heart rate rises, for example, it can be a natural tendency to be like, start talking in your own head, right?
Yes.
I mean, this is just more of an inquisitive practice as opposed to trying to collect information. Is that true?
I think it's both. I mean, you want to collect information. That's what the diagnostic is for, to understand your levels, and then if without judgment, of course, without any kind of like bias or what's the word? I mean, judgment is a good word, right? To try and increase your levels of interoception and increase the sensitivity. It is possible to develop this skill.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Unless, of course, there's certain neuropathologies going on, like I kind of mentioned. But yes, Damon, echoing your sentiment, just trying to like do this without judgment. It's just like lifting weights. And the reason why is because of neuroplasticity. There's a part of the brain deep inside the brain called the insula that is really about interoception and scanning the body and feeling what's going on inside your body, like hunger or something like that. And when you do these things, you do these behaviors, you actually, neurons that fire together, wire together, right? We say that a lot. You increase your synaptic neuroplasticity in those areas of the brain to make it easier for you next time to be able to, for example, feel your heartbeat. So of course, do these things in that way, from that perspective.
I was wondering if you could pivot. I know we're a little overboard, so I want to be mindful of your time.
I can go up a little bit more.
So a lot of these, it feels like the straw that stirs the drink for a lot of this has to do with attention, like where we're pointing our spotlight. Do you have some way to share with us some of your thinking around attention, and what exactly is it? Do we have different modes of attention, and how do we maneuver it?
Yes. So there's really two things in attentional control, and that is being able to focus and ignore distractions, and being able to curb impulses, or what's called, impulse inhibition. Those two things are really involved in this, and I'll show you two really interesting things. So I'm gonna call you out here, okay? I'm gonna call you out. You actually just made a mistake. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Teach me.
That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here.
That's why you're here.
That's why you're. But the reason why I call it out is because it's so popular in pop neuroscience and pop psychology to think about attention as a spotlight, and it's not. And let me show you why. I particularly chose this to show you because it's tied to embodied cognition.
Nice.
We now know that attention is we now have an example of why it's embodied. Okay, this is super cool. It came out last year. It's a really interesting study. I'm just like super excited about this study, and I'll show you the article here. Can you see my screen still?
Yep.
Is it got smaller or did it get
It's
smaller?
small.
It's small. Okay, let me do this here then. Let me do this here. Okay.
And if any questions are coming up for people, feel free to put them in the chat box, because you know, you can see you got people geeking out over this, and don't feel scared to geek out with us if you have a curiosity question around what it all means and how you can apply it.
Okay, am I back?
Your screen's not back, but you're
There you
back.
go.
There you are.
Back? Okay. All right. So I just wanted to make it bigger
there.
because it's really important.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, you could check this out. This is excellent here. So I would recommend you highly recommend you read this article. You could just type it in Google. It's for the layperson, so it's fine. But from Quantum Magazine, to pay attention, the brain uses filters, not a spotlight. Okay, a brain circuit that suppresses distracting sensory information holds important clues about attention and other cognitive processes. Now, what did they find in this paper? So the brain's number one job is to filter out information, and that's how attention works. It does not work like putting a spotlight on the world. What it does is, it's like the cocktail party effect. You're at a cocktail party and you're paying attention, but there's all this noise going on in the background, and your brain's filtering it out. That's how attention works in general, all across the board. Mm-hmm. They have this great diagram here. You could see how the brain tunes out distractions and how to get better at that. Motor action is the key, and I'll explain why. Embodied cognition, interoception is one of the key things here. So the point of this is that interoception and embodied cognition increase your attention by giving you better ability to filter out distractions. So you get this incoming information, vision, audition, and they come to this part of the brain called the thalamus, which is like a relay station. It sends information to other parts of the brain. And it sends this information to let's say the prefrontal cortex, where you're making decisions, right? That's your executive attentional network. Okay. Mm-hmm. What they found was that the prefrontal cortex actually then inhibits this other part of the thalamus to be able to focus on one thing. So for example, when it's more important to pay attention to what's heard rather than what's seen, this prefrontal cortex instructs this part of the brain called the basal ganglia. And I don't know if you've heard of the basal ganglia, but the basal ganglia is involved in performing motor acts, voluntary motor acts. So like when I grab this cup and I put it toward me, I can actually, it's a voluntary motor act, and I know how to move my hand to do this. This is the part of the brain that goes awry in things like Parkinson's disease. This is where dopamine comes from in the brain, which is involved in motor coordination and going to the fridge to get another piece of cake because of the reward, right? Dopamine is reward and motor, okay? And dopamine comes from the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is involved in motor movements and action. And what they found is that the basal ganglia is actually involved in filtering out the relevant information. In other words, attention is really involved with action, and your ability to move and perform appropriate actions can help you filter out the appropriate information so you could focus on what you're doing. I hope that made sense, but this is a really important finding here. So that is attention is the gatekeeper of consciousness. Whatever you're attending to is what you're conscious of. So the more attentional control you have, the better you can regulate your consciousness and what you're aware of. This is why meditation helps. Meditation helps you get control of your attention.
So let me ask you this, Michael, for people, let's say, because a lot of people talk about how they ruminate, their brain's just going 100 miles an hour. I know the interoception work, but would there be like a tip that you could provide? Like here is something that you could do to calm the monkey mind, if you will, right? What would be a suggestion for people because there's a lot of people who are suppressing a lot of their stresses and their struggles, and they start to ruminate, do you have any guidance on some simple strategies around, what would be a good thing to do?
Yeah, there's plenty of things to do. That's that default mode network that we
Yep,
talked about,
yep.
right? We have this, like, just staring at a white wall that, but no, allowing yourself to do different behaviors, like going in the sauna, like this is the shower effect. When you take a long hot shower, for example, you get this like increase in default mode and you start mind wandering because you're in this alpha state. Journaling, just allowing free form of stream of consciousness, is a very helpful thing. Meditation, mindful movement, coordinating your breath with, like the walking example I gave earlier is a very powerful thing. The idea is to do certain sorts of activities like this so that you can allow your brain to mind wander at the right times throughout the day. And then focus at other times throughout the day. That's when you're going to optimize your recovery. That's when you're going to maximize your recovery by, lowering your inflammation and getting through that recovery phase on that back end of the flow cycle.
Is there any work? I'm just curious, how does circadian rhythm, is there anything related to the circadian rhythm in terms of how our cycles and flow as well in this stuff? I'm just curious to know if there's any interplay between,
Yeah, absolutely. That there's other rhythms, the ultradian rhythm, that operate on different time scales. Knowing what your sort of, your personality or genetic profile is more amenable to in terms of your own circadian rhythm is a very important thing that gives you better data about yourself. But yeah, absolutely. There's tricky, not conflicting research about this, but doing some sorts of creative work or trying to get into like some sort of task engagement in the morning, right before you get into other kinds of things. It works very well for a lot of people. Other people find different times. It's really knowing your own profile that will help you out. Like Stephen Cutler talks a lot about this. Biology scales, personality doesn't, right? What works for you might not work for me, but we all have the same ubiquitous biology. So understanding that is very helpful. Understanding, your own your own rhythms. The circadian rhythms are ubiquitous, of course, throughout everybody, right? But maximizing that in terms of your task engagement and performance might be different for everybody.
I want to circle back. I know we only have a couple more minutes. To attention, and just to give you a little backstory for where we are right now, we're in kind of week 2 where, at the beginning of this program, we really honed in on trying to carve and create a personal purpose statement, true north type thing, right? Where we're really trying to, each one of us, identify what are we all about and what are we kind of going towards, with the notion that, your idea of attention, that we will find and be able to recognize patterns more frequently. Kind of the old adage of, if I'm shopping for a red car, I'm looking around, everything I see is a red car.
Right.
Is that still land with this attention as being this more of a mesh type thing, as opposed to a spotlight, more signal to noise in concept? If we have identified front loaded what it is that we're going after in life, are we more apt to see it, and are we more apt to respond in, kind of show up with that sort of value set in mind? Or is that a tough stretch to draw?
No, I don't think it's a tough stretch to draw. There's some work on this. Of course, Carol Dweck's work with the growth mindset is demonstrated, or has demonstrated, that having that sort of like outlook or mindset may make you are more amenable to learning or acquiring information and these kinds of sorts of cognitive processes. But yeah, perception is constructive. Perception is not a passive process. The brain doesn't record reality like a camera, like the information just comes in and then you see it. A lot of perception is constructed. It's an active process. This is like that there's a lot of examples. There's optical and auditory illusions that show us this all the time. The Yanni Laurel thing. I don't know if people remember that, but you know, when you're primed to those things, you'll change your signal to noise ratio, and you'll start hearing those things. Absolutely. So all of these different things affect perception.
Mm-hmm.
Language, your culture, your physiological state, your emotional state, your knowledge, your prior beliefs, all of those things affect the way you see the world. I mean, even language. Studies showed that Russian speakers can differentiate different shades of blue better than English speakers can because they have different words for it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of really interesting work like that shows that. That's, of course, going to back to Lisa Feldman Barrett, ran the emotional, your perception affects your emotional state. So when you think about, now you were tying this to purpose. When you tie this to purpose, that may be a little bit more of a stretch, but you know, as a scientist, as a neuroscientist, I would be more likely to believe that when you are focused on the things that you want to focus on, your goals, this is why we talk about the goal stack so much, and understanding your goals, there's a whole neurobiology of goals, you're much more likely to achieve them. In fact, one study showed that they put groups into 3 different groups. I'm just riffing here, by the way.
Yeah. We gotta sign off in probably a minute. So
all right. So like when you talk about goals, when your goals are clear and more succinct, you have different brain areas involved, and you're more likely to accomplish those goals when they're much clearer versus ambiguous goals versus no goals at all. And that has a lot to do with what you just said. So yeah.
And the last thing, I just got off of that, we have a wall of wins on our program, right? Where let's say I have a goal, I go out in my day-to-day life, I accomplish a small thing, and then I'm actually sharing that out there. Do you see that as being more constructive in terms of being able to kind of to wire that in? Is there science around that, with just speaking your story and bringing that to life?
Qualified. I will say yes, there is evidence that works, conditioned upon a right context, meaning psychological safety, meaning a community where everybody understands and there's egos are in check, and there's this idea of cognitive friction, a good kind of cognitive friction. This is the team on the bridge of the Enterprise in Star Trek. They had these perfect ideas: intellectual humility, cognitive friction, the appropriate kinds of cognitive friction, and other qualities that are like psychological safety. Then the wall of winds works, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. But if those conditions are not in place, it probably won't work, and it could even backfire.
Yeah, those are all those group flow triggers, though, you just defined too. I mean, those are
exactly.
the same thing, whether you're doing it virtually or you're doing it live. And I think that's, I think the last piece here is like a lot of companies are grappling with how do we go to the post-pandemic work culture where we're trying to maintain a social dynamic in a virtual space, and how do we keep people connected? And I think a lot of those criteria you just defined are, I don't think a lot of people are talking about it, but I think they need to start talking about it, because I don't think we're going back to any sort of normalcy anytime soon. So I think there's some good stuff there. We'll have to circle back, Michael, but this has been a gift. I really appreciate it.
No, of course, my pleasure. That was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope I didn't get too far off topic sometimes, but there's a lot of rich information out there.
And again, what was your baby girl's name?
My baby girl's name is Astrid Sophia, which for me means cosmic wisdom.
Nice. That's awesome.
Beautiful.
My daughter's name is Sophia as well. So I wanted to give a shout out. Oh, look at that. 6-month-old baby right there. Yeah. So happy for you, my friend.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. That was very nice. Thank you so much.
So on the wall of winds, I'd love to hear some of your takeaways. How can this be of service to you in your pursuit of just your better self, this idea of interoception? So if you wouldn't mind sharing some insights, I'd be curious to know, because we didn't get to really open it up here, and we all have to jet because we have another conversation to get to. But Michael, thank you so much.
I can come back for question and answer session. No problem, you guys. I love you guys, and you're doing such great work. So
thanks, brother.
An honor.
Thank you, man. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
See you, Michael.
Take care, guys.
Baby. See you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. So yeah, if it generated questions, definitely feel free to reach out and share anything else that you want to know, and really kind of let that sink in. I recommend doing a little bit of journaling after that kind of onslaught to see if there's anything that really kind of pops out for you. And feel free to circle back with me, and I can get in touch with Michael or just share anything that I might know as well. So great, you all. So great to see all of you. Glad that you made it on this one, and we'll continue to see you on the wall. And John, I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye, Paul. Bye, Melinda.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks, Brody.
Have a good evening.